Welcome to Traore's Stand, the unfiltered truth about Africa's new frontier. As we move through February 2026, a silent revolution is shaking the foundations of the Sahel, and it is not being fought with bullets, but with bags of cement and a fierce sense of national pride. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, now standing tall as the chairman of the Alliance of Sahel States, has just received a massive signal that the era of begging is officially over. A young billionaire, Constantine Dabiré, has stepped forward not to ask for a government contract, but to give back 40 tons of cement and millions in cash to the Faso Ma-Yabbo initiative. This is the moment the world has been waiting for, the total mobilization of African wealth for African people. What if the very billionaires the West expected to buy penthouses in Paris are now using their fortunes to build the roads that lead away from Western dependency and the dominance of the US dollar? And why is this grassroots movement in a small, landlocked nation causing the architects of the old world order to lose sleep tonight? They told us we were too poor to lead ourselves. They told us that without their loans, our streets would crumble and our children would starve. But look at the screen. Look at the fire in the eyes of our people. To my brothers and sisters in the diaspora, those of you working 2 jobs in New York or London just to send a few dollars back home, have you ever wondered what it would feel like to see your homeland finally stand on its own feet, debt-free and defiant? The pain of seeing our resources stolen for decades is finally being replaced by the hope of seeing our own sons build our own future with their own hands. This is not just a donation of construction materials. It is a declaration of war against the status quo. It is a tiny nation standing up to global superpowers and saying, we do not need your strings-attached charity anymore. But why is the West so terrified of a few miles of paved road in Ouagadougou? What is at stake for the global economy and the future of international aid when Africa stops asking for permission to prosper? We are going to break it all down and show you the blueprint of this new era in the next few minutes. Before we dive into the heart of this revolution, if you believe that Africa's time has finally come, do us a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear the truth. And most importantly, I want you to flood the comments right now with the words, Africa Rise. Let the world know that we are watching, we are awake, and we are standing together. To understand the true weight of 40 tons of cement, you have to look past the gray powder and into the eyes of someone like Mariam. Mariam is a 45-year-old widow living on the outskirts of Ouagadougou. For 20 years, she has run a small stall selling fried plantains and charcoal. For 20 years, she watched her neighborhood turn into a swamp during the rainy season and a dust bowl during the dry season. She saw her children struggle with respiratory issues from the constant dust, and her meager profits swallowed by the cost of repairing her rickety cart every time it hit a massive pothole. Mariam remembers the promises of the past decades. She remembers the shiny cars of foreign NGOs and the grand speeches of politicians who claimed that a multi-million-dollar loan from the World Bank was going to fix her street. But the money always seemed to evaporate before the first brick was laid. The interest on those loans grew, the national debt soared, and the price of her basic goods went up because the government had to pay back Washington and Paris before they could help Mariam. This is the hidden tax of neocolonialism that our elders know all too well. It is a cycle of debt that keeps the African mother working until her bones ache, while the profits of her labor are shipped across the Atlantic to fund pensions and stock portfolios in the West. But something shifted in February 2026. Under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré and the vision of the Faso Ma-Yabbo initiative, the game changed. Mariam did not see a foreign contractor with a clipboard this time. Instead, she saw her own neighbors, young men and women from her own community, picking up shovels. She saw the trucks from the African Society for Engineering and Financial Investment pulling up, not because they were forced by a contract, but because they were inspired by a leader who finally looks like them and speaks for them. When Constantine Dabiré delivered those 40 tons of cement, he was not just delivering building materials. He was delivering the final nail in the coffin of the dependency mindset. Faso Ma-Yabbo is a call to the soul of the nation. It is a philosophy that says if we want a road, we will pave it ourselves. If we want a bridge, we will engineer it ourselves. We are moving away from the era where we waited for a white savior to bring us crumbs from a table that was set with our own gold and cocoa. Now imagine the shock in the boardrooms of the International Monetary Fund. For years, they have used infrastructure loans as a leash to control African policy. If you do not play by our rules, we cut off the credit. If you do not give our companies the mining rights, we stop the road project. But what happens to that leverage when a young billionaire in Burkina Faso decides that his loyalty to his flag is more important than his standing in the global elite? What happens when the people realize that they have the internal resources to build their own future? This is why the Western media is so quiet about these successes. They want you to believe that Burkina Faso is a place of only chaos and conflict. They do not want the mother in Detroit or the father in Chicago to see that their brothers and sisters in the Sahel are successfully breaking the chains of the financial system. They do not want you to realize that if Africa stops borrowing dollars, the very foundation of the global financial hegemony begins to crack. Every bag of cement poured onto a street in Ouagadougou is a bag of cement that was not bought with a high-interest loan. This is a direct hit to the architects of the debt trap. Mariam told me that for the first time in her life, she feels like a citizen and not a subject. She stood there at the site, watching the volunteers work under the scorching sun, and she did not see a government project. She saw a family business. She saw a nation reclaiming its dignity. When the Billionaire CEO joined the workers on the ground, getting his hands dirty alongside the youth, it sent a message that no amount of foreign aid could ever buy. It proved that in the new Burkina Faso, there is no gap between the elite and the street. We are one fist striking against the wall of injustice. But this movement is not just about one neighborhood. It is the blueprint for the entire Alliance of Sahel States. Traore is showing the world that when you remove the middleman, when you remove the corrupt foreign influence, the wealth of the land actually stays in the land. The money that used to leak out of the country through crooked contracts is now being recycled into orphanages like Home Kisito and into the very pavement that our children walk on. You have to ask yourself, why has this not happened sooner? Why did it take a young captain and a group of determined citizens to prove that Africa has the tools to save itself? The answer is simple and it is painful. The old system was designed to fail us. It was designed to keep us in a state of perpetual development that never actually leads to a finished product. But those days are over. The architecture of freedom is being built right now, 1 ton of cement at a time. But as the roads get smoother and the people get stronger, a much darker shadow is beginning to loom over the horizon. The global powers are not going to sit back and watch their playground become a fortress of independence. As Traore consolidates this power through the AES, the retaliation is already being planned in the shadows of the world's most powerful capitals. The question is, can a movement built on local cement and national pride survive the incoming storm of international sabotage? In the high-walled gardens of Paris and the luxury penthouses of Geneva, there is a certain type of African billionaire the West has always felt comfortable with. They are the ones who make their fortunes on the continent and immediately ship every cent to a Swiss bank account. They buy yachts they only use once a year and invest in European real estate while their own hometowns lack clean water. For decades, this was the successful African model, an elite class that functioned as a vacuum, sucking wealth out of the soil and depositing it into the hands of the very people who once colonized them. But Constantine Dabiré is the West's worst nightmare because he represents a new breed of African titan. He is young, he is brilliant, and he has realized something that the old guard was too blind to see. A billionaire is only as strong as the nation that stands behind him. When the CEO of the African Society for Engineering and Financial Investment walked onto that construction site in February 2026, he wasn't wearing a 3-piece suit made in Italy. He was there with 40 tons of cement and a check for 1 million CFA francs for an orphanage. He was betting his fortune on the vision of Ibrahim Traoré and the success of the Alliance of Sahel States. Think about the courage that takes, in a world dominated by the US dollar and the SWIFT payment system, for a financial leader to openly align himself with a revolutionary like Traoré is to put a target on his back. The global banking system does not like uncooperative wealth. They prefer wealth that is quiet, wealth that is obedient, and wealth that stays within the boundaries of the Western financial architecture. By funding the Faso Ma-Yabbo initiative, Dabiré is telling the world that he trusts the stability of a paved road in Burkina Faso more than he trusts a treasury bond from a country that can freeze your assets at the click of a button. This shift in mentality is spreading like wildfire through the African diaspora. Take the story of Dr. Samuel, a brilliant structural engineer who spent 20 years working for top firms in London. He has a beautiful house in the suburbs and a pension plan that most would envy. But Samuel told me that every time he looked at his bank balance, he felt a hollow ache in his chest. He was building the infrastructure of his former colonizer while his own mother's village in the Sahel was still struggling. When he saw news of billionaires like Dabiré and leaders like Traore working side by side with the youth, Samuel did something his colleagues thought was insane. He resigned. He didn't come back to Burkina Faso to retire, he came back to invest. He is part of a growing wave of the diaspora who are tired of being successful in a system that views them as second-class citizens. They are bringing their Western education and their hard-earned capital back to the AES region because they see a winning hand. They see a leader who isn't looking for a handout, but for a partnership. This is the strategic map that the mainstream media refuses to show you. This isn't just a feel-good story about charity. It is a high-stakes game of geopolitical chess. On one side, you have the old world order, trying to keep Africa in a state of permanent aid so they can keep their hands on the uranium, the gold, and the lithium. On the other side, you have Traore, who is building a fortress of self-reliance. When a billionaire buys 40 tons of cement for the state, he is effectively deplatforming foreign influence. He is proving that the internal resource mobilization strategy isn't just a slogan, it's a bankable reality. But let's ask the question of justice. Is it fair that for 60 years, African entrepreneurs were forced to look to Washington or Brussels for the capital to build their own countries? Is it just that our resources were sold for pennies on the dollar, only to be lent back to us at predatory interest rates? The answer is a resounding no. What Dabiré is doing is an act of financial decolonization. He is placing social impact at the heart of his operations because he knows that if the AES fails, his business fails. If the people remain in poverty, his market remains small. By donating to the Home Casito orphanage and supporting the volunteer workers with food and water, he is healing the social fabric that neo-colonialism spent decades trying to tear apart. He is showing that in the new Africa, the billionaire and the orphan are part of the same tribe. This is a level of social cohesion that the West, with its deepening class divides and crumbling social safety nets, can no longer achieve. The critics will say this is just a drop in the bucket. They will say 40 tons of cement won't pave a whole country. But they are missing the point. The cement is a symbol. It is a signal to every other business owner in West Africa that the wind has changed. It is a signal to the youth that their sweat is being matched by the capital of the elite. And most importantly, it is a signal to the global powers that their monopoly on development is over. However, we must be honest about the risks. The price of this independence is high. When you step outside the shadow of the dollar, you lose the protection of the global elite. You face sanctions, you face media smear campaigns, and you face the constant threat of economic sabotage. The question we have to ask ourselves as we watch these trucks roll into the construction sites is this: will the rest of the African business class have the spine to follow Dabiré's lead, or will they wait until it's too late? The stakes have never been higher. If this experiment in self-funding succeeds, it will provide a blueprint for every oppressed nation on Earth. But if it is crushed by foreign pressure, it might be another 50 years before we see a leader like Traoré or a billionaire with this kind of heart again. The battle for the soul of the AES is heating up, and the next move on the board will determine the fate of millions. To understand why 40 tons of cement has the power to make generals in Paris and bankers in Washington nervous, you have to look at the map. Not the map drawn by colonial pens in 1884, but the map being carved into the earth by Ibrahim Traoré in 2026. This is the AES chessboard, and for the first time in history, the pieces are moving according to an African strategy. As the newly appointed chairman of the Alliance of Sahel States, Captain Traoré isn't just leading a country, He is commanding a confederation of survival. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have officially turned their backs on the ECOWAS system, which they now rightly see as a Trojan horse for foreign interests. When Constantine Dabiré donated his wealth to the Faso Ma-Yabbo initiative, he wasn't just fixing a local street. He was funding a strategic artery in a regional body that is rapidly growing its own skin and bone. The centerpiece of this chessboard is the newly operational AES Investment and Development Bank. Think about what this means for the global financial hierarchy. For over half a century, the CFA franc, a currency controlled by the French treasury, was the chain around the neck of West African progress. If a country wanted to build a bridge, they had to ask for permission in Paris. If they wanted to hedge against inflation, their gold reserves were held in French vaults. But today, the AES is building its own financial fortress. They are implementing a confederal levy, a system where the wealth generated from Sahelian gold, uranium, and lithium stays within the bloc to fund their own mega projects. This is the Bank of Rebellion. Every time a local billionaire like Dabiré bypasses the World Bank and puts his capital directly into the AES Development Fund, the US dollar loses a tiny bit of its grip on the continent. Washington knows this. They understand that if the Sahel successfully creates a resource-backed currency or even a unified bartering system for infrastructure, the petrodollar's dominance in the global south begins to unravel. This is why the rhetoric from the West has shifted from supporting democracy to containing instability. They aren't worried about instability. They are worried about an Africa they can no longer audit. On this chessboard, the Faso Ma-Yabbo roads are the veins. Traore's 20 major projects for 2026 are not random. They are designed to connect the mining zones of the north directly to the urban centers and the borders of Mali and Niger. By building these roads with local cement and volunteer labor, Traore is doing something the West thought was impossible. He is creating endogenous growth. He is proving that you don't need a 20-year loan with a 15% interest rate to pave a highway. You just need a leader the people trust and a business class that isn't afraid to be patriotic. But let's look at the predators in the shadows. France, having been kicked out of their military bases, is now trying to play a desperate game of intelligence diplomacy through neighboring countries. They are whispering in the ears of regional leaders, warning them that Traore's radical independence will bring economic ruin. They are waiting for a mistake. They are hoping the lack of foreign credit will cause the AES to starve, but they didn't account for the diaspora factor. Millions of highly educated Africans in the West are watching these events on the new AES joint television channel. They are seeing the truth, unfiltered by CNN or BBC, and they are starting to move their money. I spoke with a man named Umar, a 52-year-old taxi driver in Paris who has lived in Europe for 30 years. He told me, for 30 years, I sent money home just so my family could eat. Now, I am sending money so my country can build. I'm buying AES bonds because I want my grandchildren to move back to a place that doesn't belong to the French. This is the move the global elite never saw coming. The brain drain is reversing. The capital flight is turning into a capital homecoming. Traore is playing a masterstroke by inviting Russia and China to the table. But on his terms. Unlike the leaders of the past who signed away their land for a few suitcases of cash, the AES leadership is demanding infrastructure and technology transfer. They are using the rivalry between the East and the West to secure the best deals for their people. It is a high-wire act. One slip, and the region could become a battlefield for a new Cold War. But as Traore often says, it is better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. The real danger now is the hidden coup. We know that as of early 2026, Traore has already survived at least 5 major attempts to topple his government. These are not just internal military squabbles. These are orchestrated efforts by those who stand to lose billions if the Sahel remains independent. They want the cement to stop flowing. They want the volunteers to go home. They want the people to believe that the old way was safer. But can you tell the mother who finally has a paved road outside her house that she was better off in the dust? Can you tell the orphan at home Casito that the $1 million CFA donation from a local hero is dangerous? The momentum is shifting. The chessboard is no longer a site of African sacrifice, but a site of African sovereignty. The question is no longer will the West let them succeed. The question is, can anyone stop a people who have finally realized they are the source of their own wealth? As we watch the final segments of these roads being completed, we are witnessing the birth of a new geopolitical bloc that doesn't care about the approval of the G7. They are building a world where the price of gold is set in Ouagadougou, not London. They are building a world where an African billionaire is judged not by his bank balance in Switzerland, but by the number of tons of cement he contributes to the liberation of his people. But don't be fooled, the most difficult moves are still to come. The global powers are preparing an economic blockade that will test the very soul of the AES. Will the people's stomach for independence hold when the luxury imports vanish? Or will the spirit of Faso Ma-Yabbo be enough to carry them through the winter of international isolation? The next move belongs to the street, and the street has already chosen its captain. The silence from the corridors of power in Washington and Brussels is deafening, and if you listen closely, you can hear the sound of the old world order cracking. The gift of 40 tons of cement and the millions of francs donated by a young billionaire in the heart of the Sahel hasn't just built a road, it has sent a shockwave through the halls of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. For decades, these institutions have operated on a simple, unspoken rule. Africa must remain a customer, never a competitor. They want us to buy their expertise, hire their contractors, and, most importantly, borrow their dollars at interest rates that ensure our grandchildren are born in debt. But what we are seeing in 2026 is the birth of the alternative. Behind closed doors at the U.S. State Department, analysts are frantically rewriting their reports. They aren't just worried about Russian grain or Chinese rail lines anymore. They are terrified of the Traore precedent. They are asking themselves, what happens to the U.S. dollar if every African nation decides to follow the Burkina Faso model? If our own billionaires start funding our own infrastructure, the need for the dollar disappears. If we trade our gold and lithium directly within the AES for the materials we need, the petrodollar hegemony loses its heartbeat. This isn't just a local donation, it is a direct challenge to the financial architecture that has ruled the planet since the end of World War II. In Paris, the reaction is even more bitter. The French media, which for years has painted Ibrahim Traoré as a transitional figure or a temporary strongman, is now forced to confront a leader who is actually building things. Every kilometer of road paved by the Faso Ma-Yabbo initiative is a kilometer that wasn't built by a French company. Every bag of local cement is a bag that wasn't imported from Europe. The civilizing mission that France used to justify its presence for a century is being exposed as a fraud. How can they claim we need them when we are building our own future under the leadership of a man they tried to isolate? The sour grapes in the Élysée Palace are turning into a full-blown diplomatic tantrum. But Traoré and the AES have stopped listening. Meanwhile, in the East, Moscow and Beijing are watching with predatory interest, but also with a new sense of respect. They see that the Sahel is no longer a collection of vassal states looking for a new master. They see a bloc that is negotiating from a position of strength. Russia sees a security partner that pays its own way. China sees a market that is actually developing its own purchasing power. But even as we welcome new partners, the question remains, can Africa truly stand on its own without just trading one master for another? Traoré's answer is in the cement. By focusing on domestic resources first, he is ensuring that even when we work with the East, we do so as owners, not as beggars. But we must speak about the price of the rebellion. The West does not give up its prizes easily. We are already seeing the financial Iron Curtain being lowered around the AES. Sanctions are being sharpened. Credit lines are being cut. They are trying to make life so difficult for the average citizen in Ouagadougou or Bamako that the people will eventually turn on their leaders. They want the gas prices to soar, the pensions to vanish, and the markets to run dry. They are betting that our hunger will be stronger than our pride. They are waiting for the winter of crisis to break the spirit of the revolution. This brings us to the question of justice. Is it just for a global system to punish a people simply because they want to pave their own roads with their own money? Is it just for a billionaire like Constantine Dabiré to be labeled a risk by international banks because he loves his country more than he loves a Swiss bank account? We are witnessing a war between two visions of justice. One says that the world must follow the rules set by the powerful. The other says that every people has a God-given right to their own soil and their own destiny. I look at the older leaders in neighboring African countries, those who have spent 40 years in power by bowing to Western ambassadors. They are the most nervous of all. They see the Traore effect spreading to their own youth. They see their own citizens asking, why is Burkina Faso building roads without loans while we are still paying off debt for projects that never started? The divide is no longer between North and South, or East and West. The divide is between the old Africa of dependency and the new Africa of dignity. As we look toward the future, the stakes for the American diaspora and the global African family have never been higher. If Traore succeeds in making the AES a self-sustaining engine of growth, the charity-industrial complex will collapse. The images of the starving African child that have been used to guilt-trip the world for 50 years will be replaced by the image of the African builder. This will change how the world looks at you, whether you are in Harlem, Brixton, or Bahia. It will change the value of your history and the power of your future. But let us be clear, the price of failure is total chaos. If the AES is allowed to fall, the West will move in to make an example of us. They will dismantle every paved road, they will auction off every mine, and they will ensure that no African leader dares to speak of sovereignty for another 100 years. This is why the donation from SA2IF is more than just cement. It is a sacrifice. It is a bet on a future where we are no longer the world's footstool. The coming months will be a trial by fire. We will see if the billionaire class has the courage to double down when the sanctions hit. We will see if the youth can keep their shovels in the ground when the propaganda machine tries to steal their hope. But when I see the volunteers in Ouagadougou sharing water and pineapple juice provided by their own local companies, I don't see a people who are afraid of the dark. I see a people who have already found their light. I want to ask you, my viewers, especially those of you who have lived through the struggles of the civil rights era and the independence movements of the 60s. Do you believe the price of freedom is ever too high? Can a nation truly be free if it still depends on its enemy's bank? As the sun sets over the newly paved streets of Ouagadougou, the dust that once blinded our elders is finally settling. But the fire in the heart of the Sahel is only beginning to burn. We started this journey today by asking a simple question. Why is a single truck of cement in Burkina Faso causing more panic in the halls of Washington than a military parade in a global superpower? Now you know the answer. It is because that cement was not bought with the chains of debt. It was not signed for with a pen held by a foreign banker. It was a gift from a son of the soil to a leader of the people. It represents the moment the African billionaire decided that his legacy is more important than his bank balance in a foreign land. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, standing as the chairman of the Alliance of Sahel States, is showing the world that the dark continent was only dark because our own gold was being used to light up the cities of our colonizers. Every bag of cement poured, every franc donated to an orphanage like Home Casito, and every hour of labor given by a young volunteer is a brick in the wall of our true independence. We are moving toward a future where we no longer ask for permission to be great. We are reclaiming our dignity, our resources, and our destiny. This is the new Africa, and it is being built by us, for us, and through the grace of our collective strength. To our brothers and sisters across the ocean, know that your homeland is no longer the victim of history. It is the architect of a new world order. We are proving that when the elite and the streets stand as one fist, no superpower can break us. The roads we are building today will lead our children to a tomorrow where they are the masters of their own fate. This is not just a dream anymore. It is a reality being hardened in the sun of the Sahel. Before we leave today, I want to invite you to join us in a ritual of solidarity. This is not just about likes and follows. It is about the spirit of our people. If you believe that Africa's freedom is worth the struggle, if you believe that Traoré's vision is the path to our redemption, I want you to perform an act of faith. Type Amen in the comments below to bless this movement. If your heart beats for the liberation of the motherland, subscribe to this channel and stand with us as we witness the rebirth of a giant. Let us pray for the safety of our leaders and the strength of our youth. Thank you for watching Traoré's Stand. Thank you for being part of this historic moment. We will be here, keeping watch until every chain is broken and every road leads home. Stay strong, stay proud, and remember, Africa can do it. God bless you all.